What up, dog? I know, there's a red squirrel in here and you want it. You want it bad, don't you? Go get it. I'm all for it. I don't want it in the boathouse. If you can catch it, all the power to you. He came semi-close the other day.
On today's episode, we'll be installing the remaining 8 ballast keel bolts in Arabella, drilling through the 4 remaining bronze floors, the keel timber, and down partway through the lead keel. Then, we'll open up pockets through the sides so we can attach the washers and nuts from there rather than from the bottom. The lead will fight back, eating a couple of drills and several bits, but we're not stopping until we get the last 4 floors in place.
Up until now, there's been 2 of these holding the keel timber to the ballast keel, and they go through the ends, through the nibs here. And the reason we put those in is we assembled everything upside down, because it was easier to shape the deadwoods and get it all lined up. And then we could drill down through the nib, which really wasn't drilling through much lead, and get everything registered with the bolt holes, so that when we flipped it right side up, we put the bolts back in, everything would line up perfectly. And all we really need right now is just to keep them lined up and hold them together. Everything's sitting on top of the lead. There's not really anything to make it move, so the 2 have just been fine. And the reason we did it this way is so that we can install these bolts exactly where we want them. So we've got the big bronze floors, and they've got the holes that we put in them for the keel bolts. And we didn't cast the bolts into the lead, which is very, very common and completely, totally works. And for many reasons. And one of those reasons is so that we could make the floors, whether they're wood or whether they were metal, put them exactly where we wanted them, and then drill the keel bolts exactly where we wanted them and have everything line up. The other thing is by doing it this way, we can put in what's called a pocket keel bolt. So these are not long enough to go all the way through the wood keel and all the way through the lead keel. They go all the way through the wood, and then they go 6 or 8 inches into the lead, and we'll drill in from the side and slide the nut and washer in. That way we have a lot less bronze rod we need to use, we have a lot shorter hole we need, and down the road, if you ever need to take them out, you don't have to jack the boat all the way up to be able to get underneath it. And you also don't have this gigantic rod that you're dealing with when you take it out. So the boat could be sitting right on blocks on the hard. You can pop the wooden plugs out of the side and then just unscrew the bolt, and pulling this up inside the boat is really not going to be much of a deal. Our bilge is almost this deep, so you just take the floorboards out. It would be a pretty easy task. So that was kind of all in the forethought when we poured the ballast keel and left it as one big chunk of lead. Now if we had done an iron keel, we absolutely would have had to put holes in for the ballast keel bolts, because you would not want to drill a 1-inch hole through a giant iron keel. But drilling the lead, as long as you go slow, it's really not too difficult. We're going to put all 4 of these into the boat and clamp them into place, and then we'll be able to see exactly where we need to drill and get these holes drilled. All right, you ready?
Yep.
You certainly are not light.
We clamped all 4 floors to the frames and made adjustments as needed to make sure that they were sitting in the right place. When that was done, we used our wood owl bit to get the hole started by a few inches with the bronze floors clamped in the boat. Then they'd be removed to continue the hole right up to where the lead starts.
I gotta mark this with tape at like 9.5 inches or something like that, so that we don't drill into the lead with the wood owl.
Cool.
And the wood owl kind of, no matter how careful you are, you end up rubbing up against the bronze here as you're drilling. So I just want to go far enough that we have a good guide and we can pop it back in.
The joys of working in the boat and dropping things.
Good.
Timber should be 10 inches deep, 9.5 maybe. Keel timber's 10, so we'll do like 9.5 or so. Cool.
You're leaning a little bit against the hole. Nope. Well, that's never happened before. That's not good.
Wow, Milwaukee.
That break? That is not ideal.
Wah, wah, wah. I haven't had these fetch up like that.
No.
Cool, let me grab some vice grips and we'll see if we can work that out. Oh no. She's intact. Okay, well, we'll be more careful. I do not want to do that again.
No.
It's about time to drill some lead. So we have our extended bit here that we made a while back when we were drilling the first keel bolts that went through the backbone and through the nibs. And previously this extension on here was substantially longer because we needed to reach through the keel, through the deadwood, and through the lead keel. And when we did that, having it welded on here is pretty risky because that's definitely the weakest point on that drill bit. But thankfully when we were doing those, all those pieces were coming back apart. So heavens forbid the drill bit broke in there. We would just take the pieces apart, we'd have access to the drill bit, and it really wouldn't be too terrible to take it out. In this instance, if this were to break, we would be in a world of hurt. Not that it's not impossible to get it out, absolutely is. It would just be a real pain. Thankfully, we only need to drill down to about the time the bit's going to disappear in. So if something were to happen there and it really gets stuck, we'll have access to the top and we can weld something on, clamp something on, drill and tap it, whatever we need to do to get it out. So it shouldn't be too bad. So speaking of drill bits getting stuck and broke, we had the wood owl get fetched up there when the Milwaukee drill snapped on us. And people often enough ask about where the drama is and the kind of candid moments when things go wrong. And this time, we actually caught it. And that was about how things go. So, you know, kind of shit happens, and we've found in our 34 odd years on this planet that freaking out and getting all upset and yelling and screaming and throwing stuff just does not help anything, and that there really is nothing that is insurmountable. So in that case, had the bit really broken off in there or truly been something that we couldn't get out, all we would have had to do is go to the local hardware store, get a piece of 1-inch inside diameter steel pipe, cut and shape some teeth into the end of it, weld a nib on the end so we could chuck it into the drill, and then we would just basically chase the drill bit all the way down, cut a sleeve around it until we could fish the drill bit out, fire up the lathe, make a wood dowel, put some resorcinol in there, hammer that in, let it set, and re-drill. Definitely not ideal, but absolutely recoverable. And for basically everything on the build, all the hiccups that we run into, that's how it is. It's perfectly recoverable. So just try to keep our cool and keep carrying on. So let's keep carrying on. So before we actually get into putting this bit in there and drilling some lead, and every time we deal with lead, do anything with lead, the people get really concerned. So in this instance, we're going to put on some rubber gloves, and that's going to be it. And the reason for that is that we're slowly cutting the lead with the drill bit, and we are not creating dust. And the dust is really the dangerous part when you inhale it. And with drilling it like this, we're not going to create any dust. There's not really much of a concern with that. And we'll have gloves on for when we're picking up the lead chips that come up and out. We also have the fest tool with the HEPA filter on standby. And when we need to clear out the holes after we drill, we'll just stick the fest tool over there and suck anything out. And if there is any dust in there, that will collect it, contain it, and dispose of it properly. So worry not, we will be safe. Cool, and this is the procedure, just really nice and slow. We're getting good chips coming out. And the last thing we want to do is get the lead in there hot, or get the bit hot, because the lead can melt and we'll basically end up soldering the bit into the lead. And that will really be a nightmare to remove. And chasing the bit and drilling it out in the wood would be a pain, but not like horrible. Doing that in the lead would be a real nightmare. So we just want to go real slow, real careful, and make sure we don't get this thing stuck or broken there. I really love all the things that people told us would be incredibly difficult or impossible to do, like drilling lead. This is so easy. You just gotta go slow. Having the hard lead with all the antimony I'm sure helps, but it's really not difficult. We got all of the holes for the keel bolts drilled, so there's 8 in total, and they're about 18 inches long. It's about the length of these bolts. So they go through the wood and part way into the lead. And there's one here. So that means that this rod's going to end somewhere right in there inside. And what we need to do is drill in from the side until we intersect it. So the hole coming down and the hole coming in. We'll carve it out a little bit, and then we can slide the nut in the washer into that pocket, tighten it from the top, and we don't have to have a giant hole and a giant length of bronze that goes all the way through the bottom. Now drilling in and figuring out exactly where that is can be a little tricky. So while Alex was drilling, I made this jig. It's just out of some scrap. And this one is 1 inch, so that'll fit snugly down into the hole. And then the ends are they're square to each other and they're the exact same length. So once this goes down into the keel bolt hole, all we have to do is take the square, put it on this one, slide the square over until we hit the lead, and that's where we need to drill in. And then what we'll do is we'll start drilling from there. We'll use a small bit and we'll kind of just fish around until we hit the hole. And when we go into the hole, we'll feel it. The drill bit will push forward. You'll know you hit it. And then we'll know exactly where it is. We can switch out to bigger drill bits and just kind of open that up and get it carved out enough that we can eventually fit one of these nuts and one of these washers into there. So now the other fun thing is that this is a little under 9 inches. And that's 5.5. So we can tell how far we gotta go. About 3.5 inches in, there, somewhere, we should intersect the hole.
Yep.
Oh no.
Did you just break it? Oh.
After I was saying how easily lead drills.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, well, I'll grab another one and we'll drill just above it. And we'll just make sure we chisel it out. Yep, when we do it.
Yep.
I think I just broke through.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're in. Yeah. You're just off center.
Perfect.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How close to the bottom does it look?
I can't tell from there.
Yeah.
It all looks kind of the same.
Sweet.
So after we confirmed that the setup with the jig was working as planned, Steve moved forward while I used the progressively larger bits to start opening a slot big enough to start chiseling. It does alright until you hit the end of the threads.
Yeah.
And the lead can't come out. With this first one done, Steve could now come back and start carving out the bit that broke off.
We're cutting the pockets here for the ballast keel bolts. So this just needs to be enlarged enough that the nut and the washer will slide in there. You can see the nut just about fits. Don't want to get that stuck. And then once this is finished carving out, we can slide the nut and the washer in there, put the bolt in from the top, and tighten it up. We'll just shove an old screwdriver or something in there and wedge it in next to the nut so that it can't spin. We'll tighten those up. So the process for these is we put the jig in, and we find where we need to drill to line up with the hole that's in the lead. And then we've been using a 3/8 half-inch, somewhere around there, bit to drill in until you find it. And you know you found it because you're drilling and all of a sudden you just go forward an inch or so. Once we found it, we know we're good, and so far, knock on wood, we've hit it every time. We've been coming through and drilling a hole on either side of it with a little bit bigger bit, and then chasing those with a little bit bigger bit, and basically carving it out so that we have 3 holes all in a row, and then we can attack it with the chisels and carve it out. And the lead actually chisels pretty easily. It's a pretty deep, narrow spot that we're working in there, so that's a little bit challenging, but honestly it's not really that much harder than trying to chisel a mortise like this into oak or locust or some other hardwood.
For the most part, this process has gone well and progress is being made. The only problem we've encountered so far is dealing with drill bits failing and drill bits fetching in the lead and breaking off. Not a serious issue, just takes time to chisel them out, but it certainly seems like we need some better equipment that can take the abuse.
Man, we're breaking shit today. So I've had this old DeWalt drill for a long time, and I've beaten the heck out of it, so much so that the chuck's a little warped. And so a little while back we decided we needed a drill that was in a little better condition and the chuck would be more accurate. And I've heard good things about Milwaukee, so we bought this Milwaukee drill. And we used it for the centerline timbers and all of that went well, but we've yet to drill anything that kind of pushed the drill a little bit. It was all pretty easy drilling. And then we started to drill the lead for these pockets and we snapped it off. So the bit fetched up a little bit, we put it in reverse, and the chuck just broke right off. And we're like, wow, that was really weird. Maybe something was wrong. We got like a bad bolt in there or something, you know. So we took it back. Well, we didn't take it back, but we went and we ended up buying another one, and that one immediately broke. We bought this one yesterday. So I'm like really disappointed in Milwaukee. I don't know what to say, but I've heard good things, and apparently these drills, at least this model, is not up to snuff. So anybody have recommendations for a good quality drill that we're not going to destroy? And all of our battery operated DeWalts are starting to go. The battery tool connection is funky. Some of them you got to like hold them when you use them. So if anybody has a tool brand recommendation that you think would actually survive us, we are very interested, because so far these tools just, they're not up to snuff.
So we were looking for a different way to get the pockets opened up that didn't rely on using the drills and chisels as much. The router worked great to level the top of the ballast keel, so we figured we'd give it a shot in this application.
Long router bit. That's the cutting length on it. So we're going to put the router on the slowest speed it can and put it in here and see if we can kind of open it up a little bit with that. I have no idea if this is going to work or fail horribly, but it's only one way to find out. I think that is working.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You don't need like a jig or anything, right?
No, I can just follow the outside of that hole. Nothing else that'll get us closer.
Yep. Still working?
Yeah, I mean, I took a lot out. I think we're gonna have to clean up by hand.
Yeah.
But that goes almost all the way back there now.
Nice.
It's not fun or easy.
Were you expecting it to be?
No.
Do you want me to take a crack at it?
Sure, if you want.
The router actually did a great job of opening the pockets. As always, the most important thing was just to go slow. Once big enough to start chiseling, our friend Madison stepped in to help carve out deeper into the hole so the nuts and washers fit all the way back to where the bolts come down, and smoothing out the edges. There were still a few pockets to get started, but these went much smoother and there were no more equipment failures slowing us down. We actually almost entirely carved these out with the router, which, once I got the hang of, it actually left very smooth edges.
Being a rookie, sometimes we make rookie mistakes. And the slots in the ballast keel are an example of that. So we measured down for the bolts, and when we drilled like a little bit extra just to be sure, and we cut the slots. And before we cut the slots, I really should have gone back and checked the lengths of the bolts, because what we ended up doing was cutting the slots between 1/4 and 3/4 of an inch lower than they needed to be, and the bolts that we had ended up not being quite long enough. So it was a really simple solution, and that was just to fire up the router and the drills and raise the top of the slot a little bit so that the bolts will work. And in the end, it's not really a big deal. We took out a little extra lead, but compared to the weight of the ballast keel, it's totally negligible. And it's actually going to make putting these nuts and washers in there that much easier. And if anybody has to take them out in the future, it'll make it easier. So really, no harm, no foul, just a little bit of extra time and a little bit of extra work. But now we are ready to put the bolts in. So first, we're going to take some copper naphthenate here, and we're just going to poison the bolt holes in the keel timber. Since these go all the way out and could potentially get some water and stuff coming into them, we want to make sure that that wood's got some sealer on it. And then we're going to use some dolphinite, and we're going to bed the bronze floors in that. And then once these are all snugged up, we'll pack dolphinite into these holes and hammer in a hardwood plug over it and smooth that out, paint over it, and call it a day. And then down the road, if someone or us ever needs to check or take out a keel bolt, the wood plugs will be a lot easier to find and take out than if we filled them full of lead. And if for some reason one or even all of the wood plugs managed to escape the boat out in the ocean, it really wouldn't be that big of a deal. The bolts are going to be a snug fit. We'll put some bedding compound and cotton under the washers in the top. So it shouldn't really be a problem. And the plugs would be very, very easy to replace if we had to. So no real need to go anything crazier than a hardwood plug hammered in. So that's the plan, and let's go see what happens. Take that, creepy crawlies. It's gonna be so different when all these molds are out here.
God, yeah. We tied cotton to go underneath each washer, and this acts just like the cotton caulking that will go between the planks to stop the water from seeping through, if that is even ever the case.
Can you bring it down about a quarter?
Threading the nuts was a little bit tricky to do by feel alone, and tough to capture on video as well.
Squish my fingers in there. And it's getting close. Keep going.
Alright, we can go to the other side and snug that up and move on to our last one.
Ballast keel bolts are all in.
Another project we had going on in the background this week was sorting out two of the forward floors that weren't sitting right on the frames. Though the forward edge of the wings fit real nicely to the frames, the aft edge did not. There were no easy fixes for this. Rather than cut and re-weld the frame, we opted to create some oak shims that could be glued onto the frames using the resource knot we have. Once dried, we were able to shape them with a combination of slick, planes, and rasps. We'll let you know how that turned out soon. Next week, we'll be trying to answer a lot of big questions that have come up online that we haven't had the chance to address in recent episodes. Until then, thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe.